The Trump administration continues to be dogged by several investigations into Russia's meddling with the election and whether associates of Mr. Trump were involved. Some say the president isn't doing himself any favors by suggesting he's recorded conversations with former FBI Director James Comey, and on Friday saying he'd testify under oath. Presidential historian Jonathan Darman is here to put this all in historical context for us. Jonathan, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I want to first get your overall perspective. As a presidential historian, how would you characterize what we witnessed this past week?
I think it's certainly a historically significant week. I mean, just the Comey testimony alone as a sort of dramatic, theatrical moment is up there in the sort of pantheon of congressional testimony with John Dean's performance in the Watergate hearings and Oliver North's testimony in Iran-Contra. This is a moment that we're not going to forget. And I also think, though, this week that the sort of historical stakes for what's potentially involved in this scandal were raised by what we learned from the Comey investigation. You know, the FBI director talking about a president pressuring him on an ongoing investigation into the president's own campaign, combined with the reporting from the Washington Post about potential conversations that the president had with the director of national intelligence and the head of the NSA. That's really the Watergate territory and really the end stage of Watergate territory. Those are the kind of allegations that brought down Richard Nixon in the end.
So, okay, you mentioned Watergate. We know it would be unusual for the president to testify under oath, but how unusual would that be?
It would be extraordinarily unusual for a president to testify under oath. A president's only appeared before a congressional committee 3 times in history. The last time that a president did that was immediately after Watergate, when Gerald Ford went before the House Judiciary Committee to sort of explain his reasoning behind pardoning Richard Nixon for his Watergate offenses, which was at the time a very controversial act. But significantly, Ford wasn't under oath. He was testifying in public, but it was not sworn testimony. So the President of the United States this week suggesting that he might be willing to swear under oath and give testimony contradicting what Comey said would be a really incredibly extraordinary moment.
Yeah, I mean, so give us a sense of context here. It was interesting. Former NSA Chief James Clapper said recently that this is far worse than Watergate. What's your sense on this?
Well, you know, for 40 years since Watergate, every scandal that's come along, we've sort of tried to wedge into the Watergate template. We do it with that suffix gate, you know, whether it's Bridgegate or Iran-gate, Debate-gate. And sometimes it's sort of a hard fit. What's been amazing for those of us who study history so far with this is how easily this sort of template fits on. It's starting with the crime in question. It's a potential burglary at the Democratic National Headquarters, followed by allegations of meddling with the FBI, and even whispers of a White House taping system. So I would say that, you know, if Watergate is the sort of gold standard for presidential scandals, we're so far following that path.
So you wrote an article recently about how long it took for the Watergate investigation to move along. This Russia investigation could last months, if not years. Is that something that people should be sort of bracing for as we continue to hear more and more about this?
Yeah, I think we're accustomed to living in a world where everything is much faster than it used to work. But the sort of politics of scandal work at their own pace. And a lot of it has to do with how members of the president's own party read the politics of a situation. You know, this is about honor and this is about the law, but really this is a process that's run by politicians who are looking out for their own interest. And in the Watergate example, it really took about 2 years for a significant number of Republicans to break with the White House and say we really need to see something significant here there needs to be an intervention.
All right, so every president has to deal with leaks in their administration, but I did not know, you wrote about somebody that I never would have imagined would have this kind of leak situation, President Lincoln. Tell us about that.
Well, so this is actually the first time that you had a president appear before a congressional committee, and it's what today we would call sort of the context of a leak investigation. President Lincoln's annual address to Congress had appeared in the newspaper before he even delivered it to Congress, which made the Congress understandably quite upset, and they sort of were digging into it. And Lincoln, unfortunately, came to the conclusion that there was a good chance that the White House leaker in this particular case was his own wife. So he went up to the Hill basically to sort of ask them to get him out of trouble here. And in exchange, he testified before them, and they sort of accepted another story from the White House that a gardener had been passing by and read the speech and somehow magically committed it to memory.
Wait, this is Honest Abe we're talking about.
Well, Honest Abe wasn't floating that story, but he was certainly asking the committee to sort of, see if it could get over it, and in time they did.
Okay, we are in much different times now. Jonathan,
we certainly are.
Jonathan Darman, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.